year. But in this country, when you say things like that in a lot of places, people just gasp. Why is America so far behind Europe, for example, on this issue?
Oh, I don't think it's true. I think people just lie to the opinion polls. Try it. Stand in the center of any American town or city, north or south, on Sunday morning, see if the place is 80% empty. It's not. There isn't enough room in the churches anyway. People are mowing the lawn and having a martini, and if they're lucky, sexual congress with the spouse. Or if it's a really good Sunday, all three. They tell the pollsters they believe in Satan more than they believe in Darwin's theory of evolution, but they don't know anything about either. And when they go to the hospital, they act as if they think Darwin is probably more likely to be right. So I think it's hugely exaggerated. Everywhere I go, I find that everyone who comes to the meeting thinks they're the only other atheist, and they're amazed to find that everyone else is one too.
Yeah, I find the same thing.
Whereas if I was in Europe, my country of birth, in England, the Queen is the head of the church as well as head of the state. You have to pay for both. And when she dies, her slobbering, weak-chinned Dauphin of a son will be the head of the Church of England. And he wants to convert to Islam in the meantime. And this is what you get when you found a church on the family values of Henry VIII. And in Germany, you have to pay a tithe to a church, whether you want to or not. We are very lucky in this country. We have a better tradition. We have Jefferson, we have Thomas Paine, we have the First Amendment, we have the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom. We're the only country in the world that says the state can't
You're a wet-fingered conservative.
Wet-fingered
He says he's voting for McCain because he'd rather lose an election than lose my bearings.
Well, that sounds as if the bearings have already gone. Just look at what was just said. It's as if our taxes are not likely to go up, not because one candidate proposes or another. We're not babies to be talked to like this, but because the country's credit has imploded. And that was not as it happens on Barack Obama's watch. So it's childish to say promise everything to everybody like this. I want to go back to what you said about the fruit flies, because I actually think it's very important. Sarah Palin...
Not funny, Lars.
Jeers about this because she thinks genetics is a joke on its own and in itself. We have every reason to think that she thinks that dinosaurs lived on the Earth the same time as humans did. She certainly advocates the teaching of creationism in schools. In other words, the deliberate, planned, state-financed stultification of American children at a time when our lead in matters of science and science education is not as robust as it might be. This is a disgrace.
Larry,
it's not serious to have such a person.
The fruit flies are
in politics at all.
Let's deal with the big issues.
Yeah, she's a creationist and a religious fanatic.
Let's deal with... She's not a fanatic.
And she says she's been saved in some tabernacle in Wasilla.
Okay.
How does she know she's been saved? How does she know that?
Why should this be unconstitutional? It's totally optional. No one is forced to pray.
No, but that's why the government shouldn't have a word to say about it. That's why it can't be a national day of prayer that has any government sponsorship. It's as plain as anything could be. The First Amendment is written with admirable clarity. You know, Congress shall make no law respecting any establishment of religion. I look out of my window in Washington, I can see, I don't know how many churches. Everyone can go to them all the time. If you're a Muslim, you're supposed to pray 5 times a day. Just don't bother me with it, and don't ask for the government to endorse it.
Christopher, why do you think the Obama administration is behind
medicine was very... Well, the Obama administration is afraid of being accused by people like your guest of being socialist and secular. It's the same reason why James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and many others were forced, and Benjamin Franklin.
The vast majority of the American people have always been.
I'm very sorry to say, sir, that people of the stature even of Benjamin Franklin, as well as Mr. Paine, Mr. Madison, Mr. Jefferson, had to be very careful to keep their opinions to themselves, because your equivalents in those days threatened them with persecution if they were honest about the fact that they were not Christian.
Just ask if you have any. I don't have any limits relative to Al-Qaeda. None. Blowtorch. Look, Christopher wants to reference a blowtorch. It's fine. Any example you want to come up with Al-Qaeda, I'll go along with it.
There you are. You see, there are 3 things. One is, point very well made by Senator McCain, a torture victim himself. What becomes of our prisoners if we say that anything goes? That's a self-interested point as well as a principled one.
Do you think we're protected by that code when Al-Qaeda grabs one of our people?
Think so. I mean, I think it could now be increasingly unpleasant to be an American POW, and you can see the justification they'd come up with. I thought McCain was right to point that out.
Do you think the killers of Richard Pearl needed any justification for cutting his head off?
Daniel Pearl.
But do you think they had to read the papers to get, oh, well, now we can cut his head off because look what the Americans are doing in Abu Ghraib.
I agree that they don't need an incentive to behave as vilely as they do. I'm not making, I wouldn't allow them that excuse, but once the United States has said anything goes to a prisoner of ours, you can see that it could make life uncomfortable for an American prisoner.
By the way, I'd be just
as
concerned about the fate of Richard Pearl as Daniel Pearl.
Yeah, of course, so would I. Absolutely, disagree on that. And then the second point, obvious, is that those of us who've criticised this are saying it opens the door to rougher stuff, the pincers, blowtorch.
Your reaction to that?
My antagonist has just simply said, yes, that's absolutely right.
The reason for the Geneva Accords, of course, you know this, Michael, as well as I'm not teaching you, I'm not patronizing you, all this was so that we would have some sense of...
So Christopher, tell me why the need to write this book?
Well, it's not written by me. It's written by great thinkers and philosophers and scientists down the years, those who don't believe that God intervenes in human affairs, and those who think we have to take responsibility for ourselves, basically. Why now? Well, because of what the parties of God are doing everywhere you look, whether it's trying to acquire nukes in Iran, or trying to destroy civil society in Iraq, or trying to bring on the Messiah with crazy settlers on the West Bank, or trying to teach nonsense in American schools under the guise of so-called intelligent design, or hold up stem cell research. All of this kind of thing, I think, has created a healthy backlash response, which is why this book is already on the paperback bestseller list as soon as it was published. It's not because of my blue eyes.
Right, and you think it's very important that Mitt Romney starts talking about his faith.
Yeah, I think he has to be asked a number of very important questions. One is, what was he thinking until 1978, when he was a year when he was well into adulthood, which is the year that the Mormon Church officially ceased to be a racist organization. Up until then, it wouldn't really admit a black person to any office under its doctrines. That's a very important question, seems to me. We don't know either how sincere the Church's revelation that it shouldn't be doing this anymore was, because they only changed just in time to come into conformity with the law, as they had previously with polygamy. And then there's the question of the Church's elders and the so-called prophet who leads it, whose authority is supposed to be higher than that of any other human. In other words, higher than the U.S. Constitution. So we need to know what Mr. Romney thinks about that too.
Christopher, it's Willie Geist here. I know you've been following that story out of the Sudan very closely, where a British school teacher, they were extremists calling for the death of a school teacher because she dared allow her students to name a teddy bear Muhammad. I guess this sort of proves your thesis. Is that the way you look at it?
Well, in a way it does, in a way it doesn't. I mean, the whole business of not representing the prophet, having pictures of him or idols or images of him, is initially quite a good idea. It's supposed to stop idolatry. It's supposed to prevent idolatry, but now, of course, it's become a form of idolatry. In other words, you can't have a rational discussion about the prophet without someone calling for death.
For the discussion now, you don't think this is a hate crime? In fact, you went so far to ask the question in your piece, quote, why are we so scared of offending Muslims?
Yes, well, the two things are very much connected. First, contrast the semi-literate language of the statute you just read out from New York State to the very lucid and beautiful language of the First Amendment to our Constitution, which guarantees the right of freedom of expression. That may very well involve, and in fact was designed to protect, criticism of religion. It may be expressed in a very vulgar manner in this case, but if I don't like a book by James Joyce or Karl Marx or Ayn Rand and I decide to spit on it or hurl it around, it's not the sort of thing I'd be likely to do, but it's nobody's business legally.
But if you take that same book,
it's not a hate crime. It's nothing to do with intimidation.
And use it as an act of intimidation. I'll give you an example. Someone sent us video of a Quran. Sent us video of a Quran being shot. That wasn't a hate crime, but that same person took the Quran that was shot and threw it at the door of a Tennessee mosque in an act of intimidation. That's when it crosses the line into a hate crime.
It's not. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, Mr. Cooper. I don't see where that's an act of intimidation. It may be
when you go to a
extreme
house of worship and intimidate them using desecrated
I suppose I'll have to just
text.
wait my turn.
All right, but let's Christopher, bring it back to Pace University.
I think I'm sorry.
You're saying there's no evidence that those students.
Ms. Zahn.
Yeah.
Ms. Zahn, I'm sorry. I thought that question was for me.
Well, carry on about
from you, not Not from Mr. Hooper. The second thing is this: as the leader of an American Muslim lobbying organization which defends, for example, people like the crooner Cat Stevens, who under the name of Yusuf Islam has publicly called for the murder of a novelist now living in New York.
He never did that, and he has explained that.
Mr. Hooper would be much better employed in attacking what really is intimidating, which is the awareness among everyone in this profession, including CNN, which told me last year that it wouldn't run the cartoons from Denmark because it was afraid for the safety of its bureau chiefs. Let's see where the real intimidation is coming from. As long as this kind of thing is licensed in the name of religion, Mr. Hooper, you're going to have to expect that people can also be offended. You won't just be the only one to say that you're shocked or upset. Some people will say that they are fed up with religious bullying, and it's high time that they did, and high time you got used to it.
I must say I thought that the question is a supposition that if we'd made a nice offer of creating a modern and developed society, the Taliban might have been nice enough to accept it. Has a long way to go before it's even naive. The people like the Taliban are often said to be the product of poverty and unemployment. That's not the case at all. They are the deliberate cause of poverty and unemployment. They, for example, begin by sacrificing and repressing the talents of 50% of the population. And also making war on other Muslims, the genocide of the Taliban against, often forgotten, the Hazara population, the generally Persian in origin, generally Shia, a large population of Afghanistan, practically put to the sword. Iran nearly invaded Afghanistan to stop that happening. Yep. We have a quarrel with al-Qaeda, not just about its nasty habits of terrorism, but about its creation of societies that are failed to begin with. And it's out of failed societies that rogue societies come. So we can't be neutral about that, any more than we can be neutral about the attempt to enslave the women of Afghanistan or put one of its ethnic minorities to the sword. Our signature on the Genocide Convention alone mandates that we take this kind of thing very seriously. Okay, let's not forget we were already committed in that part of Asia, and we always will be, to, among other things, and I would say most importantly, our alliance with India. A great,
so when will we withdraw, do you think?
Well, I would say as long as we maintain a real alliance with India, a serious, secular, multi-ethnic, multicultural
when do you think we're
republic,
going to withdraw?
What
do I think?
Yeah, the Americans and the British will be out.
You did ask me a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but time is against us. Just a quick...
There's no withdrawal from our alliance with India. You can't,
I don't think we will.
Nor should there, it shouldn't even be discussable.